Very much, Chair Curtis. Good to see you in the chair's seat. You have so much power now. Well, I wanted to go back to a journey of December 2023 when a group of us led by Senator Kane went down to Guatemala. President-elect Arevalo had been here. A couple of us had met with him, and he said, I may never actually become president, either because they will invalidate the election or I'll be assassinated. And I asked him, would it be helpful if a group of us come down before the installation to show American support for the integrity of the election and the integrity of the democratic process? And he said, that's the single best thing you could do. So we went. And while we were there, the Attorney General of the country invalidated the elections. And we immediately did a press conference and stood up for the integrity of the elections, the integrity of democracy. Some European delegations did the same day, and by the end of the day, the then president, the outgoing president, said he would stand by the elections and the installation. I was very, very pleased to see America standing up for democracy, standing up for integrity of the process. President Arevalo ran on economic development for the whole nation, and that really made a huge impact on the indigenous population, recognizing they had a champion in him, which they often didn't have in a president in Guatemala, and his effort to take on corruption. And you just mentioned corruption a moment ago. Now we are cutting programs that support anti-corruption and support economic development. What impact will those cuts have on the stability or success of Arevalo's effort to improve living and stability and take on corruption and establish a better democracy?
Senator, thank you very much for the question. And first, for me, framing to be perfectly clear, my understanding is that the administration is in the process of evaluating the wheat with the chaff, which things make sense to continue in some new form versus what things don't. But for me, and also, frankly, to dovetail off of what Senator Kane said, for me, there is no other region in the world with which what happens, whether for good or bad, most directly impacts the United States through ties of immigration or commerce or security. So understanding that connectedness, I think, is probably the entire committee shares. Understanding that one of the biggest impacts for opening up the doors for China, and we see that with, for example, Venezuela, when, again, frustrations with corruption opened the door for first Hugo Chavez and then Nicolas Maduro, or, for example, in Ecuador, talking about how Rafael Correa came to power, or in Bolivia, how Evo Morales first came to power. That frustration with corruption, oftentimes in the sense that governments are not performing, opens up the door for radical left that hijack democracy, and often in terms of who buys the most Chinese arms, who buys the most Chinese security systems, who engages with the Chinese in the most problematic ways. What you see is that when there's a loss of faith in democracy, that often opens up those doors. And so I certainly would concur that helping our partners to succeed as democratic governments in the fights against corruption and other things is important. And at the same time,
you've kind of leapt forward to my second and third questions, but I'll just acknowledge that. I do think that cutting the terminations of foreign aid programs that have included supporting democracy programs and good governance will have an impact. Maybe some of those will be restored. As you say, maybe there's the chaff that can be set aside. I think it's very important to carefully defend the programs that support his efforts in economic development and strengthening the institutions of democracy. But then this has broader impacts, which you've leapt forward to. And certainly if we have a weaker relationship with Guatemala and terminate these programs creates a more open door for China. But I wanted to ask about one specific aspect. Maybe it's been asked about, but I wasn't here for the rest of the hearing, so I apologize. And that is whether undermining programs in Guatemala might also undermine the ability of President Arevalo to continue to support Taiwan. He's under tremendous pressure to abandon the recognition of Taiwan. We've encouraged him to sustain that, but if we're doing less on economic development, China has the opportunity to say, well, we'll do more, recognize us.
Thank you very much for the questions. I wanted to go back first to your earlier comment about democracy. And I think when you talk about democracy erosion, there's really three things that we need to be looking at with that. One is public apathy. Globally, you're seeing citizen surveys that are uncertain about whether democracy is delivering economic growth. And that is a major challenge, I think, for democracy. I think secondly, is that you do have wealth maximizing, power maximizing politicians that are looking for opportunities to accumulate power. But then you also have motivated external salesmen, and I think that kind of brings us to the point of this hearing. China and Russia and other authoritarian allies are very happy to find ways to demonstrate that their models of development, their models of governance are more attractive, that they will deliver. And I think there's an opportunity for the U.S. to counter that in two respects. One is bolstering Taiwan, who actually has made an effort to demonstrate that you can have development and democracy to be successful. It's not very good about telling its story as a successful democracy, so that's certainly one thing to think about. But two, in terms of the U.S., there is a whole of society approach that we need to be thinking about here. Our civil society, our private sector, our government, engaging in places like Guatemala to shore up democracies. And to do that, you're thinking about investing in watchdog capacity of civil society, journalists, and whatnot. You're thinking about increasing the technocratic competence of officials in these governments as a counterbalance to politicians, and then investing in accountability. I would like to see the U.S. continue to be a voice and put resources behind doing these things from a government perspective. But at minimum, we should also be working with our private sector and civil society actors to shore that up further.
So I'm over my time, but I just want a kind of a yes/no if possible. Does canceling programs that we support in Guatemala on economic development and democracy building make it harder for Guatemala to maintain its current relationship with Taiwan?
I think we need to get the programs that we support right, sir, and make every program dollar that we spend count.
That wasn't exactly an answer. Okay, so you're going to not answer that one, but how about for you, Ms. Custer?
I am similarly going to give you a non-answer, but I will say that when it comes to fighting economic pressure from China, we've removed an important stick and lever at our disposal. It makes it easier for Guatemala
so
to say it's not worth it.
You're the experts, and you don't want to answer the question. So I want to tell you how I think the right answer is. Absolutely, if we undermine our programs with Guatemala, it creates economic pressures that China will see as an opportunity, and that opportunity will go with a requirement that Guatemala abandon its relationship with Taiwan. I think that's the right answer. If we had further time, I'd ask you if you disagree with that, but thanks.